evening to you and welcome back to Checkpoint here on KTN News. We are delighted to have your company with us. My name is Sophia Wanuna. Our conversation just about to begin with the CS Education, Dr. Ambassador Amina Mohamed. But before that, let's bring you some of those figures around the cases of unrest we have been reporting on in the past couple of weeks. A worrying trend that we keep seeing every year. And despite investigations, as I was saying earlier, task force reports, it's still a problem that's a thorn in the flesh of the Ministry of Education and the management in these schools. So we'll be hearing from the CS. But let's put up those figures for you about just what we've been seeing in the schools this year. 141 schools affected. Of this, 68 were cases of arson, school fires reported. In most of these cases, investigation reportedly is still ongoing, but most of them closed and shut indefinitely, school students sent home. So you have this incident that happened in Shalby Boys High School where 6 non-local teachers were attacked by students, and 2 of those teachers were seriously injured and admitted in a local hospital there. We have 390 students that have been arrested this year. 152 students have been charged, 3 students sentenced to jail. You remember it was the PS Kipsang who had said they would not be dealing with them as students but as criminals or people who have engaged in criminal activity once they face these charges. So causes of unrest is some of what we've been hearing so far. Some of the ministry officials talking about examination phobia. Teachers' unions have brought about the issue of delocalization, which is a transfer of head teachers. They have strongly opposed that and they're saying it's perhaps is one of the contributing factors. So we'll get into all that now with my guest in studio. CS, thank you so much for making time for KTN News Checkpoint. So let's begin with the schools unrest. It has become a perennial issue. Literally, as I was mentioning, it's almost like it's part of the calendar, school calendar. It's unfortunate, it's unacceptable. Why is it this problem will not end?
Well, it's unfortunate, as you said, because it's something that has continued to happen, and it's a wave of unrest that happens during the second term.
Yeah.
And so many reasons have been given. You have just listed, some of them. Delocalization, well, we had school unrest even before delocalization began. So maybe it is a contributing factor, maybe not. Right? I think the jury is still out on that.
Yeah.
But unrest was present in our schools during second term, even before delocalization. And I think that's a point that we will need to keep in mind, right, as we have this conversation.
Right.
So it's unfortunate that it's happening. It's mainly during the second term. The studies that we've carried out, including the 47 county dialogues that I held from the beginning of the year and concluded. So we held 47 county dialogues. All those dialogues revealed the same pattern. That
and
is
this was
fear of
with
exams.
the heads of education in the counties?
All stakeholders. Actually, all stakeholders
right.
in the counties. It's parents, associations, it's unions, it's the teachers, it's students even who participate. And what we figured is that, and that revealed, is that, yes, exam phobia. And I had some, some assumptions being made that there's no exam phobia in national schools. Well, that's not true.
Yeah.
Actually, the evidence has showed that there are some national schools that also experience exam phobia. And there are many reasons for the exam phobia. One reason is that students are not well prepared, right, to sit the exams. The other one is that cartels have promised, right, that they will be able to get exam papers, have asked parents to pay for those, and when that proves to be a lie, because these papers are supposed to be there during the second term, when that proves to be a lie, of course, then students get agitated. Drugs abuse, alcohol abuse. In fact, a study that was carried out by NACADA itself showed that 40 to 41% of secondary school students consume alcohol and other substances, right? And they also give a figure of 27% of that happening during inter-school activities, okay? I'll give you an example of what I think may have happened that caused the disruptions that we had in schools. In Nyanza, for instance. There was an inter-school debate that was taking place at Kisumu Girls, right? 27 schools were represented. The majority of those schools actually had unrest, right? Some, of course, fires, others just general unrest.
Yeah.
Okay. The intelligence that we got, the information that we got back, was that during that period when they had the inter-school debating competition, that they started having discussions on school unrest because they were not prepared for the mocks. Okay, and as we followed that up, we realized that actually it's the same schools that were present at the girls' school, right? They even dared the girls to be the first ones. They said, "Well, we had this conversation in your school.
Yeah.
Why aren't you the first ones?" And that happened, right?
Yeah.
Shortage of teachers is another cause that takes place. And of course, during the dialogues, we realized that there was a bit of absenteeism on the part of the teachers, but also there was a lack of serious engagement between students and parents, okay? Because the students spend a lot of time in the schools, right? And so there isn't enough quality time spent with parents. So, there's no simplistic way of looking at this.
It's a number of
complex.
issues.
It's complex, yes.
But that's the thing, because a lot of what you're saying, especially around the phobia on examinations, it's something we've kept hearing over and over the years. And one of the things Nat came out to say the other day is that schools like Maranda, Kisii, Meru have performed well in the past, so that they argue, the argument and the comment around phobia of exams doesn't fly because they're performing well anyway.
Well, actually, that's not correct.
Yeah.
Because the exams from some of these schools were cancelled, right? Which basically means that there is a phobia, right, of exams because of the absence of exam malpractice, of leakage of exam papers, okay?
Yeah.
So there's a feeling,
yes,
right? There's a feeling that because there's no cheating, right? Children are more frightened of sitting the exams.
Right.
They're afraid of failing exams. They're afraid of the repercussions that has, especially with respect to their, engagement with their parents.
Yeah.
So it's not true that these schools have not experienced, they have not experienced a fear of exams, because if they hadn't, actually experienced that fear, they would never have had exams cancelled.
And
the
is
results
it
are cancelled.
across the board that you find all the students are afraid, or is it rogue elements that perhaps if the teachers, the management in the schools worked together would be able to catch this in time?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that it takes working together.
Yeah.
I mean, there is no way that you can get away from that. The teachers must work hand in hand with the parents. They must be able to actually see the warning signs, right, of unrest, right, in schools, and tell us that in good time so that we can use the resources that we have at the national level, including our collaboration with other ministries and agencies, right, to curb unrest. Okay, so that's really, really critical.
Has the ministry considered perhaps punitive measures so that you say if a case of an arson or unrest that we've witnessed happens in your school, then there's going to be this and this kind of implications, so that they're also on their toes knowing they will be held accountable under the bar stops to them?
I think that all teachers know that any bad behavior, any malpractice, any attempted, offense, criminal offense, or actually a criminal offense taking place, right, shows badly on their performance record, right?
But
I think that's very, very
stronger
clear. And I have told them, I've told them since the beginning of May that we will hold them accountable for any such malpractices in the school environment by making sure, obviously, that people look forward to promotions. Right? You actually want these children to remember you well. Yeah? And so there are all sorts of things. There's all sorts of administrative measures that we, together with the Teacher Service Commission, that is the employer of this of these teachers, right? Can take. There is no way that the ministry on its own can actually institute
the disciplinary measures.
Disciplinary measures. But what we do is we provide reports with actionable recommendations to the Teacher Service Commission, and then they take action. But let me tell you this also. That having said all this, this year we have actually had the least number of fires in schools. So the work that has been done, right, both this year and before this year, right, has paid off, if you like, right? Because last year, for instance, there were over 200 cases of unrest, majority of them being fires. The year before that, there were 453 cases, and so the numbers are going down, but I don't think that we should actually sit on our laurels. One fire is one too many, right? And we must address this. So what have we done? What have we done? One of the things we have done is put in place a multi-agency task force, right? It's a standing task force that is already working. Ministry of Education, Ministry of Interior, and coordination.
Haven't we had too many of those
teacher service
in the past?
No, because what we are trying to do is to make sure that the recommendations in the reports that we commissioned, you mentioned those, actually refer to them.
Yeah.
We commissioned 3 reports, right? There were recommendations that were made in those reports. We have implemented 75%. Right, of the recommendations that were given in the reports. What we're trying to do is make sure that the 35% that is left, the 25%, sorry, that is left, right, including any additional things that we may have noticed, right, in the past, say, 12 months, right, since the last year's fires, this year's fires. What is it? What have we noticed? Is there any change in the trend of these things? Are they beginning early? Are they ending late? Okay, what is happening in between? Why is it that in some schools this this perennial, they recur? In others, it's the first time. So we're studying all that because the intention is to ensure that as we go forward, right, we try and put a stop to these fires. We are not proud of this. We cannot be proud of this as a country. We are one of the only countries in the world that actually experiences this, right? And so we must make sure that we address all these underlying issues, including this issue of alcohol and drug abuse, right? I mean, during school holidays, 50% of the cases, actually happen during that time, right? So we need to work together to make sure that this is stopped. We have now started and actually are insisting on fencing around all schools. Okay, because we had a number of schools that were not properly fenced, including Kisumu girls. Okay, and others. Kakamega High School, for instance, not fully fenced. So what we're trying to do is make sure that all these schools are fenced. What will that do? It will ensure that there is no interaction, right, on a daily basis
with the outside world.
Between others and the students.
So
that there is a safer environment created in the schools.
One of the biggest concerns has been, you've mentioned about the engagement with stakeholders in the various counties and of course with the TSC as well, but the students, the place of their voice, because a lot of what we are seeing, many look at it as this group of young people without a ventilation space, without a way to be heard. They're not being heard in their schools, decisions are being made, policy implemented, but we're not hearing their input. Are you getting that voice now and trying to ensure that even going forward, it's entrenched in schools, that every school has a way in which they get feedback from the students?
It's so critical. It's very, very important. And it's an issue that was identified in the 3 reports that I talked about, that we commissioned. The need for there to be a little more flexibility in the schools, right? The need for there to be a set number of hours during which a child actually goes through schooling, and a set period of time during which they can interact with other students, they can play games, they can engage in co-curricular activities, for instance. They can just have time to think. Okay, and so I'm sorry, I'll tell you that many schools don't actually implement that. And so what we're trying to do, in fact, with the multi-agency task force, but also with our boots on the ground, the regional education officers that we have, the county directors, the sub-county, what we're trying to do is collect reports on who is not complying with this. And we want to ensure that there is full compliance, right, with the requirements, right, for schooling, right, to make sure that, and when there isn't, obviously we'll take measures. We want to enforce them. We want to make sure that there's a little bit of flexibility that allows these children to actually express themselves. We don't want robots in schools, right? We want students that can actually engage with their teachers, can engage with their principals, with their head teachers. We have, I think the ministry had put in place the whole best practice of barazas, right, where the head teacher listens to the students, answers their questions, and there are no repercussions for asking a question that even touches on the behavior of a teacher, for instance, right? So that baraza was supposed to be completely independent of all school regulations and rules, right, so that children can feel free to express themselves fully. We also had a requirement that there should be suggestion boxes in all schools. In most of the schools I visited, they actually were there, right? Where students can drop a suggestion or a complaint, or, and those complaints were supposed to be looked at, right, every 24 hours, to make sure that there was nothing that was getting out of hand, right, in the school. So there are measures like that that we have taken and put in place, right? We are also going to create safe zones in schools and bring in independent counselors and guidance officials, right, from outside, so that the children do not feel constrained, right, and feel free to express themselves, to talk about the challenges they're facing in schools, the difficulties they're facing, and even give proposals on what the solutions should look like.
Going forward. Before we take a break, so many, again, reports, a lot of looking into these issues. You have come, you've put together a team. Can you give Kenyans any confidence about we will see an end to these things? Because it's been, again, year on year. So as we close that conversation and move on to other things when we return, what is that thing that we should take home as this is my commitment and this is the different thing I will do?
It's been said before that the difference between progress and catastrophe is education, right? Education is critical for all of us, right? It's not just about, government. It's about everybody, all the stakeholders. And if all of us take education as seriously, right, as the executive is actually taking education, we should be able to get a result that pleases, right, instead of displeases us, right? And so the parents, obviously, full-time, full-time. I think nobody can be a quarter-time parent. We must be full-time parents, right? We must know what's happening with our children. 50% of the children that are involved in alcoholism and drug abuse do it even during school holidays, right? What's happening there, right? Then in the schools, the teachers, we have to have hands-on teachers who actually know their students, understand their needs, right? But also attend to their concerns, to their fears, right? The neighborhood, and Moi Girls is an example. The neighborhood of the school, we have to make sure that schools are protected. They're protected from all the other, activities that take place in society, right? And then at the end of the day, our own behavior. We are not good role models, right? We are not good role models. If we were, we wouldn't see half of the things that we see in schools. So I think it's time that all of us, realize that everything that we do impacts on our children, right? It impacts on the future of our country, because those children are actually the future of our country. So we must all take the steps that are necessary, right? Come together to safeguard our future, to safeguard our children. All hands on deck.
All right. You've mentioned the Moi Girls School here in Nairobi. We'll be talking about that when we return, as well as one of the big issues that NAT has been raising on delocalization, saying it's misinformed and it is not working. They're one that's reviewed, of course, by the TSC, but it's a matter on education. So we'll have the CS comment on the same. Please stay with us here on Checkpoint.